Seow Leung sworn in as Hong Kong's new chief executive under China President Hu Jintao's witness. On the same day, thousands of demonstrators marched onto the streets demanding democracy, while tons of fireworks launched into the sky. The Hong Kong HKSAR anniversary dominates tonight's evening news.
In Perth Stories, the opposition leader Mark McGowan interviewed about the state election, and Colin Barnett has announced a major cabinet reshuffle in the state government.
This is the Evening News.
Good evening. In the blink of an eye, 15 years have passed since the establishment of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region. This year's return anniversary is proved to be historical, with Donald Tsang stepping down, allowing Seow Leung to take over as the Hong Kong chief executive under the witness of China President Hu Jintao.
As Hong Kong marked its 5th edition, a flag-raising ceremony was held at the Golden Bohemia Square in Wan Chai. Among some of those present was new Chief Executive Seow Leung and his wife, as well as other senior government officials. A lavish inauguration ceremony for Hong Kong's newly appointed chief executive was held at the Convention Centre, where Mr. Leung as well as other members of his government took their oaths. However, during the swearing-in ceremony, a Civic Party member protested against this one-party rule, and hundreds of demonstrators gathered outside the venue, urging the newly appointed chief executive to step down as they felt he was unfit to be Hong Kong's leader. Timothy Seow, DHK News.
On the same afternoon, hundreds and thousands of protesters rallied from Victoria Park to the new government headquarters, demanding democracy and voicing other social concerns. Organisers said there were 400,000 participants, while the police said 65,000 joined in the demonstrations. A spokesperson from the new government said people have the right to express their views and promised to listen to protesters' demands.
Huge crowd of protesters flooded the streets of Hong Kong, calling the local and mainland governments to respond to a series of controversies confronting the city. Main roads in the city were swarmed with banners and posters, vividly recording marchers' dissatisfactions towards a wide array of issues. While more active youth participation was observed, the surprising participation of hundreds of mainland Chinese brought in concern over the chronic corruption problem on the mainland. The march started at 3 p.m. and ended 6 hours later. Organizers claimed that an approximate 400,000 people had participated in the protests, a record-breaking turnout of similar protests since 2003. In big contrast to the breathtaking figure, the police estimate the peak number of demonstrators at 63,000. University Research Institutes believe that the actual turnout will stand somewhere between 98,000 and 112,000. William Mann, DHK News, Hong Kong.
Meanwhile, Hong Kong's Victoria Harbour show a very different picture with tons of fireworks launched into the sky. The 20-minute fireworks show attracted many citizens and tourists who gathered around the waterfront for the show. But the demonstrators at the new government headquarters have expressed their anger by booing the fireworks display and called Chief Executive Seow Leung to step down.
Hong Kong Marine Police said they have acknowledged the report that a shark was seen around Lamma Island. The government has temporarily closed beaches at the south of Deepwater Bay to Shibs, plus 2 other beaches on Lamma Island. Citizens are warned not to swim around those areas until further notice. Ivan?
Thanks, Anne. Back to Perth, and major political parties and independent candidates are gearing up to contest the seats at Parliament House as the state election looms closer. Colin Barnett's main rival, Mark McGowan from the WA Labour Party, spoke to DHK News about the election matter. I sat down with him earlier this morning at Parliament House. Well, McGowan, welcome to Evening News.
Thank you.
How is the election preparation going?
Well, the election's in March next year. From now on in, it's very busy, and you have to be in the process of writing policies and making sure you point out the deficiencies of the government, and that's what we're going to continue to do for the next 9 months.
After so many years in politics, can I ask you what makes a good politician?
You've got to have an intuitive feel for it. You've got to know what works with the public and what doesn't. You've got to have a set of ideas and beliefs that you want to pursue. You can't just be someone who blows with the wind all the time, but at the same time you can't be someone who's not in touch with what people are thinking. You've got to have a good work ethic. You've got to be prepared to do things you don't want to do. You've got to be someone who can talk to ordinary people.
Recently, you have been tipping that Troy Buswell will be the next Premier of WA. Is it just a scare campaign putting by you or by your party against the Liberals?
If Mr Barnett's re-elected, Mr Buswell will become the Premier of Western Australia because there is no one else in the Liberal Party's ranks. Christian Porter was obviously going to be the successor. He's leaving the State Parliament. Kim Hames, who was the other alternative, has announced his intention to retire. There's really no one else. So if Mr Barnett, and when Mr Barnett decides to leave, Mr Buswell will be the Premier of Western Australia.
But do you believe Troy Buswell has changed over the years after what have he done wrong?
I just think Mr Buswell is more hype than substance. I don't see any great reforms or any improvements. And if you have a look at some of the things under his current portfolios, the worst waiting list for public housing in the history of the state.
The annual WA Labor Party conference on last weekend has been cancelled. Isn't it evidence show that you're afraid of Julia Gillard because of her unpopular carbon tax?
No, we cancelled the state conference because we wanted to focus on election preparation and policies in the lead up to the next election. I've read this stuff about Julia Gillard and that was actually not my intention.
Let's talk a bit about the polls. In April this year, on two-party preferred basis, WA Labor is 47 while Liberals 53. Do you believe your party can gain a balance of power in the Parliament?
Well, we're going to try. We're the underdogs and that would show that we would lose. But we're going to try. If we can get it up to more than 50%, well then you've got to win the right seats as well. So it's not just a simple matter of getting 50% of the vote.
Will you resign as the opposition leader if WA Labor loses?
I hadn't thought about that. I'd consider that at the time.
McGowan, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
WA Premier Colin Barnett has announced a major change in Cabinet before the state election next year. Rob Johnson and Liz Constable are leaving Cabinet, while 3 new ministers were sworn in on Friday. It's reported that Troy Buswell has regained the Treasurer portfolio and Peter Collier will take up the Education portfolio. But the opposition believe this change is a sign of an unstable government. State political journalist Shibs has more.
3 new ministers have just been sworn in today at Government House, just right behind me. Promoted into Cabinet are Ms. Lisa Harvey, Mr. Murray Cowper and Mr. Michael Mischin. Ms. Harvey and Mr. Cowper will take on role of Police and Road Safety Minister and Training Workforce Development and Corrective Service Minister respectively, while Mr. Mischin will become the new Attorney General. As part of the Barnett government's reshuffle, Peter Collier will become the new Education Minister, Troy Buswell will become the Treasurer, and Terry Redmond will become the Agriculture, Food and Forestry Minister, while also taking over as Housing Minister from Mr. Buswell. According to Mr. Barnett, this new team reflects the talent and depth of the Liberal National Government. The Premier also took time to thank outgoing ministers Liz Constable and Rob Johnson for their contributions to the state.
I would like to thank them for their very substantial contribution to the Parliament and indeed to the state of Western Australia.
Newly appointed Police Minister Lisa Harvey expressed her pleasure on her new appointment, saying she is looking forward to working with the police.
I have the highest respect for Rob Johnson. I really like him as a person. I think he's done a fantastic job. He's left some very big shoes to fill, and I'm pleased to be given the opportunity to try and build on that very strong platform that he's already presented for our government.
In a separate interview, opposition leader Mark McGowan has accused the Barnett government of being in turmoil and neglecting the needs of ordinary West Australians.
This government has been in turmoil and instability now for a fairly long period of time. This is the 6th reshuffle since Mr Barnett was elected to government. He's had 5 ministers leave Cabinet and I think people are looking forward to some stability in government.
Shibs, DHK News.
The Health Minister Kim Hames has toured the new under construction Fiona Stanley Hospital, which costs $2 billion Australian dollars. The project is on budget and slightly ahead of time and is expected to be completed by 2013 and start treating patients by 2014. It's predicted that this public hospital will be presented with 80,000 emergency patients each year. Our journalist Alexandra Mollo was there for a sneak peek.
2 years ago began the construction of the largest infrastructure project ever undertaken in Western Australia. The construction of the Fiona Stanley Hospital is a $2 billion project which aims to provide complex health care free to patients from the south of the river and across the state. The facility will come with an emergency department which, according to Health Minister Kim Hames, is expected to receive up to 80,000 patients in its first year. He visited the premises and spoke about the importance of this project on Western Australians.
The numbers are growing and growing and our hospitals are straining under the load. What we desperately need is additional beds, and in just 18 months' time we'll get more than 780 beds at this hospital, which will create a large number of additional beds that will help us cope with the demand. And of course this will be the premier health centre for south of the river.
There are currently more than 1,500 tradespeople working on the project, and it is understood that 70% of the construction is completed, which promises a successful completion of the project by next year. Fiona Stanley Hospital covers over 150,000 square metres of floor space over 5 main buildings, including large areas of natural bushlands, parks and gardens, which in total equal to 4 CT blocks. Fiona Stanley Hospital will also be the most technologically advanced healthcare facility in the country, as patients' data and other information will be recorded on tablet computers. Executive Director of the Fiona Stanley Hospital, Brad Seps, speaks about the benefits to this paperless approach.
The electronic medical records are accessible at all places, at all times. You don't have to actually go and find the file.
The hospital will be open to patients by 2014 and will also feature education facilities and pathology services. Alexandra Mollo, the HK News.
And finally to the Euro Cup 2012, where soccer superpower Spain thrashed Italy 4-0 in the finals. David Silva scored a header in the first 14 minutes, along with Xavi Hernandez's goal 4 minutes before half-time. Italy's hope for victory has faded, with Thiago Motta pulling a hamstring and leaving the team down to 10 men. Finally, Fernando Torres and Juan Mata ensured Spain's victory with 2 more goals before the whistle blew. And I'm sure William Mann is celebrating right now.
We know the Chinese news director very well, don't we?
We do. Now, just to remind you, we'll be taking a 3-week break, so we'll see you in August.
That's how the world looks tonight. See you later. Good evening.
Good night.